Um, Good morning and welcome. Thank you to the parents who have joined us today. We actually have a small, as I say that, I have a couple more coming in. We have a small group today, which I was anticipating. Suicide is not a topic that's exciting to talk about. It's important for us to talk about, but I'm going to be honest, personally, I've been dreading this topic all week, knowing that it's coming up. It's something that's really painful for me to talk about, but it is really important for us to talk about. I'm going to turn it over to Yvonne, who, first off, I want to say happy National School Social Worker Week. So this is your week. And you get to talk about the worst and most heavy topic there is when discussing teenagers. So go ahead and let me know when you want. Do you want me to go ahead and pull up the PowerPoint?
Yeah, go ahead and pull up the PowerPoint.
Okay, let me make sure I've got it.
Still announcing, my goodness.
All right, can you see it?
Yep.
Let me get to presentation mode though. Okay.
Thank you. Yes, very tough topic. I know Judy and I both have very personal experiences with suicide in our teenagers, and thankfully not completed suicides, but definitely attempts, thoughts, sometimes pervasive thoughts with our kids. This is something that I think, every parent wants to believe that this is something that is not relevant to them or their family or friends. And that's what I always thought, like, okay, that's really, difficult for the families that are going through it. But thankfully my kids are good because, it's a scary thing to even think about. And so when it did happen, it was really terrifying, especially like, oh my gosh, I think that I'm very close to my kids. I think that they want to talk about everything with me. I have all these ideas and I just really did not know. And this is for all three of my boys at one point or another having thoughts of suicide. And even now to this day, like even talking about it is difficult because it's so real. And I think one of the things I often forget in the work that I do is that there are kids who thrive and do well, because I get a lot of referrals for kiddos who are not doing well, who are not thriving, who are not okay. And so sometimes the other social worker and I, we force ourselves to go walk around the campus because it's easy to forget that there's like good positive things happening when our entire day is stacked with suicide assessments and kids with depression and anxiety and all these things. So I always make it a point to walk around campus to see that that is not true for everyone, but it is really prevalent, even more so after COVID. So go ahead and go to the first slide, Jenny. So I'm going to talk a little bit about yes. So we're going to do a little myths and realities about suicide. So if you want to throw your answer in the chat, feel free to do that. But there are a lot of myths. There are a lot of stigmas. Kids who commit suicide are usually, using drugs and have terrible families and all these things. And that is not true. We have kids who have amazing families. We have kids who are thriving in school, who've been accepted to amazing colleges and all these things. And we just assume that if our kiddo is getting good grades, if our kiddo has lots of friends, if we're supporting them in every way we know how could they possibly be suicidal? And I literally just had a meeting with a parent where it was almost like they couldn't understand that although everything seemed to be going well, like they have a good relationship with their kiddo, they just could not fathom that their kid was depressed. And we take it very personally. It's one of the things that comes up all the time when I tell a parent, your kiddo is experiencing depression. The question is always why? Why are they feeling depressed? Why are they feeling this way? What did I do wrong? How did I go wrong? What could I have done differently? So we start to turn it around on ourselves and start blaming ourselves. And, the not so simple answer is it's not necessarily their environment. It's not necessarily the way that we're parenting them. It's not necessarily what's going on at school. Sometimes it just is. Sometimes we have depression, we have anxiety in our DNA, in our families, and it comes up, and it's very difficult for a parent to understand that sometimes there's no why. And I think when we ask our kids, why are you feeling this way? Why? Sometimes they have an answer, but more often than not, they don't. And so if we ask them why, they start to feel like something's wrong with them because they don't know why. So just keep that in mind when we're dealing with depression or anxiety. Sometimes there is no why. Sometimes it just is, and it's something that they might have to deal with for their, for their whole lives, but it's definitely something that is treatable, something that we can work on, get them feeling as healthy as we can. And sometimes people will have to cope with anxiety or depression throughout their life. That's something that I have to do. It's something that I've come a long way in learning how to manage my symptoms. I can identify when I'm starting to feel anxious way earlier than I used to when I was a teenager. When I was a teenager, it felt like it was just coming out of nowhere. And as an adult now, I know the signs and symptoms for myself to know that I'm kind of heading in a direction of, really bad anxiety or depression. And so I know how to cope with it. And that's something that a lot of our kids are dealing with right now. Go ahead and change the slide, Ginny. So the first question is, true or false? Suicides usually happen without warning. What do you think, Ginny?
I'm going to say that's false.
Yeah, it is false. Most people who attempt suicide or die by suicide have communicated their distress at one point or another. I think it's 4 out of 5 have communicated in some way to at least one other person. The hope is that that person is a parent or an adult or somebody that can intervene, but most of the time it's a friend. I would say probably half of the referrals that we get at the mental health and wellness center are from friends. We have friends walk their friends over, which I think is amazing. That just shows us that the stigmas are changing, and will tell us, my friend has been saying that they're suicidal. I don't know what to do. I'm referring them. And to me, that means so much, because it's like, not only do we get to help the student, but their friends trust us enough to bring kiddos over to our office. So more often than not, you will have a warning sign, but this is not always the case. We have had more suicide attempts with our students this year than I've had in my career here. This is my 6th year here. I've had several kids who have been hospitalized. I've had several kids who have been very close to completing suicide. I've had several kids who are thinking about suicide all the time. And this is something that has increased since we came back from distance learning. I know people struggled to adapt when they came back. And so it's very, very real for us. And this is across the district. This isn't just Piedmont. This is across the district that we're just seeing referral numbers really high. I probably do, I would say 3 to 5 risk assessments every week, which means somebody who is having pervasive thoughts of suicide, somebody who possibly has plans. I would say myself, I do 3 to 5 a week. And that has been since the beginning of the school year. I almost feel like things are slowing down. They were slowing down like January, February. For some reason this week, Kayla and I have been like inundated with referrals, like new referrals. We have students at the wellness center who are like lining up before we even get to work. And so that's, I can just tell there's something shifting right now. I don't know what it is. I'm not super familiar with like what's going on in classes right now. I don't know if we're getting close to a marking period or what's happening. I know college acceptances are coming out or have come out. So that's always a factor for us too, but I've definitely seen an uptick in students this week. Is there anything, Jenny, that I'm missing that could be impacting them right now?
No, I mean, we're in the middle of a grading period. I mean, I think this is just always kind of a rough time of year. I mean, definitely, I think you probably hit the nail on the head, college acceptances. Even for kids that aren't seniors, like hearing about college acceptances, I think that places a new like pressure, like, oh my gosh, like, this kid getting into college and their grades are so much better than mine. And, so I think that puts in a lot of pressure. I think also You know, and I've talked to ASB and I've talked to Mr. Reed. Fantastics being this week, you know, Fantastics is supposed to be like something fun, but man, the kids take it so seriously and they put so much pressure on themselves, and like it just sucks up so much time that it's just added stress. And like you get as the adult, you're like, it's supposed to be fun. And
Mhm.
yeah.
A lot of things I feel like are supposed to be fun, but yeah, not not end up being fun. Another factor right now that a lot of people don't realize is, if anyone's familiar with seasonal affective disorder, it basically is like lack of sun in the wintertime because people are indoors and it impacts our mood. And people think that that occurs mostly in like November, December, January, but actually what happens is vitamin D storages are the lowest in March and April because people have been inside all winter. And so historically, we've always had more students around March and April, just in general. And so that combined with just this being a really tough year, I think is adding to what, you know, what we're seeing right now. Is there a question, Jenny? Oh, it says, I don't know about other parents, but I notice my daughter mostly has big mood changes coming back from school. I think either through their friends or something someone said and issues that happen with their teachers. She is more stable at home on the weekends or holidays. I did notice that coming back from this winter break, it was hard for me to get motivated coming back. I'll be totally honest. It was kind of sluggish last week, but I have noticed that with students, you'll see, you know, the Sunday night before school starts, a lot of times kids will talk about like having stomach aches or headaches or just feeling extra stress. I think coming back is always a stressor, and, you know, being home on the weekends and not having to deal with like peer stuff and school stuff, besides homework, of course, and holidays, I think generally people are feeling relaxed, and then you're going right back into it. And I think the kids are just kind of hitting it hard right now with like school stuff. So it makes sense. There could possibly be something with friends. I don't know the situation, but that's a factor. And a lot of times our kids don't tell us that because they don't want to worry us, right? They don't want you to think that their friends are bad or that there's something going on. And so a lot of times things are happening under the surface and we have no idea. And I think that's the scary part of, you know, when we're talking about suicide, is like a lot of times it's like, I ask my kid every day how they're doing, and you know, they always said fine. And then all of a sudden something happens and we're having a mental health crisis. Next slide, Jenny. Talking about suicide makes people more likely to kill themselves. What do you think, Jenny?
I think that's false.
Yeah, it is false. There are no negative side effects to asking about suicide. I think a lot of times we think we might plant the seed of suicide. Like, what if they're not already thinking about it? And then we talk about it and then they start to think about it. Talking about it can be more beneficial because it gives them the open door to have that conversation if they want to have it. A lot of times kids are just sitting with it like, I don't want to share this. And if we open up that dialogue, we're opening that bridge of communication that is super important. Sometimes people feel very relieved when you talk about it. Like, oh, okay, it's going to be much easier to bring it up with mom and dad if, you know, they're already talking about it. Discussion brings the opportunity for intervention if that's necessary. It's youth who are not thinking about suicide will not be upset if you ask them, and are very direct and reassuring if they're not thinking about it. And so just opening that door and letting them share. You know, we're going to talk a little bit at the end about how to have those conversations. You know, we have conversations about safe driving, safe sex, you know, drugs and alcohol. And then this is kind of in that same category. This is like a preventative measure. Like, we have to talk about it. And so, you know, I know some of the fears are like, you know, maybe my kiddo and I don't have that kind of relationship, or maybe my kid gets mad anytime I even try to talk to them. But this is going to be one of those conversations that is like an absolute must have. However, we need to figure out how to do it. We have to make it happen because it's so important. Next slide, Jenny. People who attempt suicide are at the lowest risk for reattempt within the first 6 months after the attempted suicide, and may be at higher risk after that.
I feel like that's true.
So reattempts are very common within the weeks and months following the first suicide attempt. And so it's false. People are at greatest risk right afterwards. when first out of the hospital, people start to kind of hover over the person. They're very watching their behaviors. Don't let them shower for too long. Parents are very hyper vigilant about what's going on with their kiddo. And then, we start to feel a little more comfortable and we start to kind of back off a little bit. But I would say the first 6 months following a suicide attempt are like the most dangerous like time periods. And so, I've had kiddos who there'll be like 3 suicide attempts within like a 6-month period. And that's pretty common for our kiddos. I think one of the things that happens is, kiddos have a suicide attempt or they're having these thoughts of suicide, they end up getting hospitalized. And then when they start to look like they're feeling a little bit better, we kind of back off a little bit as parents, because the more we think about it, the more true it is. I don't know if that makes sense. Like, it's a scary thought. And when you notice your kiddo's feeling better, the instinct is just to like keep moving forward in life. But it's something where we have to keep talking about it because they are actually at higher risk. This is the most vulnerable time for them. Next slide, Jenny. What do you think? Suicide is preventable.
I'm going to say true.
Yes, thank God. It's true. The vast majority of people who are suicidal do not want to die. Sometimes they want help. Sometimes they do, but they're in pain and they don't necessarily want to die, but they do want the pain to stop. And so one thing that's important to note is that when people are depressed, you have to imagine that the feelings that they're having are worse than the thought of not being alive. Like, that's like very strong. Like, if I would rather not be here than feel what I'm feeling, that's a really scary thought. That's a really hard thought to have about our kids, right? Especially if we give them everything, we're loving, we're supportive, we're there all the time. And to even think that that's happening for them is really difficult to even process as a parent. When kids are suicidal, they've lost hope. They need that hope back, and providing a sense of hope that they can get help with their pain can and does save a life. And I think that's the biggest thing. And we're going to watch a video that's like, no matter what, we always want to instill hope in our kids. And when a kid tells you that they're suicidal, we have to take them seriously every time. Even if I have students who literally come to the wellness center every single day saying they're having thoughts of suicide, and I have to treat it exactly the same every single day. Whether or not they've had attempts, it's just something that I'm like very vigilant about, because I know that a kid saying that they want to kill themselves is real, and they don't usually say that for no reason. They're probably feeling hopeless. Jenny, I'm going to have you play that video if you can.
Yeah, let me figure out how to get out of here.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. Pulled up, it's all ready to go. Okay, get my stuff out.
Thank you. You did good.
Special report. Next week, Fairhope High School seniors will graduate and look ahead to the future. But the class of 2018 is incomplete because more than 2 months ago, Reese Johnson ended his own life. He didn't make it to his 18th birthday. He didn't go to the senior prom, and he won't go to college, despite scholarships from multiple universities. Tonight, we delve deeper into teen suicide behind the smile of Reese Johnson. I want to warn you, some of the details are disturbing, but the Johnson family feels you're hearing their message may save your child's life.
I won't stand here and apologize for the choice that he made that brought us so much pain and sadness. All I can say is I don't understand it.
Reese Johnson seemed to have it all.
I loved him.
Great looks.
He's just a great guy, always funny, and I always remember that about him.
Grades, and a personality that naturally drew people to him.
He would always joke that he wanted to make one quality short film, move to Italy, meet a nice girl, and make pasta.
He had a way of making people feel good about themselves, yet few realized the hurt he held inside.
He wasn't sitting around just, oh, woe's me. There was none of that. Zero.
Reese's parents tell me depression and anxiety run in their family. Reese suffered from anxiety. He was in therapy. He also had recent problems in school, and even though he had other scholarships in hand, he was nervous about an upcoming college interview. One night in February, he came home intoxicated, locked his mother out of his bedroom, and hanged himself.
And I saw Reese's feet. He was hanging in the corner. I just screamed and tried to hold my son up.
His parents, his friends, never saw it coming. Did y'all ever think he would take his life?
No, didn't see it at all.
He had actually said, once or twice, said something about committing suicide. You can't just say that. Okay, well, it was not even in the realm of possibility that he would ever do that, but yet it was a big possibility for him, and obviously he did.
So many regrets, so much pain for everyone left behind.
The pain that you feel, I think, pales in comparison to the pain that you cause.
If someone actually says, I'm going to kill myself, take them seriously. Take them seriously, because you don't get a second chance sometimes.
So maybe if somebody knows, I believe you when you say you may do that, and so let's go get some help right now.
And as difficult as it is to talk about suicide to our kids, the Johnsons say we have to start conversations. Reese's dad knows what he would say to Reese today if he could.
It would be 8 words. I've thought about it. I'm sorry. Forgive me. I love you.
Reese's parents and his friends believe he acted on impulse because he was so drunk that night, more than 3 times the legal limit to drive. As painful as it was for the Johnsons to go public with their story, they want you to know suicide happens a lot more than they ever imagined. Reese is one of 2 suicides in Baldwin County this school year, and there are many more attempted suicides, including a girl in elementary school. She had to be rushed to the hospital because she tried to overdose on drugs. For more information on warning signs, how to talk to your children about suicide, or support groups in our area, go to WKRG.com and look for this story.
And already, Roseanne, the Johnsons sharing this story is making a difference.
Absolutely, it is, Mel. Today from noon into 7, we had mental health experts here in our studio from Alta Point Health and also Lifeline's counseling services. They were answering phone calls about teen suicide. They received calls from people all around the country.
Thank you very much, Rose.
Thank you. Hard to watch, hard to think about. It's like our babies are our most prized possessions. And to think that they don't want to be here is just like a really hard pill to swallow. I'm going to have you forward a couple slides, Ginny. Next one. Suicide is the 2nd leading cause of death. Definitely more rampant after distance learning. I know we had a few completed suicides in the district during the year that we were home during COVID. One, I think, being a freshman, one was a junior. And these are things that we're dealing with all the time. Like I said, just those risk assessments 3 to 5 times a week. Go ahead, Judy, keep going forward. More teenagers and young adults die from suicide than from cancer, heart disease, AIDS, birth defects, stroke, pneumonia combined. Yep. Each day in our nation, there are an average of 5,240 attempts by young people, grades 7 through 12. It's scary hearing the younger kids already having these feelings of hopelessness. When I think about being a young kid, I remember just playing with my friends and, all these things. I don't remember having those thoughts. And so I know that there's so many factors that impact that. 4 out of 5 teens who attempt suicide have given clear warning signs. So again, taking that seriously every single time. It's easy if our kiddos are just kind of saying it all the time, and maybe they always feel that way, to become frustrated or to become kind of desensitized to that. But knowing that, it's real, they're saying it for a reason. So risk factors, warning signs, things we need to be looking out for. Some of these things are like very blatant. I don't want to like confuse that like this is always going to happen, because it's not, maybe your kid you find out that they're just talking about it. But the things we're more likely to see are like expressing hopelessness about the future, expressing hopelessness about school, giving up, those kind of things. Those are like the bigger signs. But we need to start looking when things are just kind of starting to brew, right? Are they more stressed than usual? Are they exhibiting symptoms that you're not used to seeing? Are they hiding out in their room more often? Is this different than what it normally has been? Marked change in behavior, particularly in the presence of the warning signs above. So just watching their behavior. Are they eating differently, sleeping differently? Do you notice that they're, having less fun with the things that used to be fun for them? Those are things that we want to be mindful of, because we are the expert in our kiddo, but there are a lot of things that we just don't know. And I know I've shared this before about one of my boys who was self-harming, like in solidarity with the girl he was talking to. I had no idea. I would have never known. It never crossed my mind. And I've become so much more vigilant about asking him very specific questions and open-ended questions every single day to open up that dialogue. I will just come right out and talk about suicide. And, they tell me that I'm social working them and that I need to stop. But, if something does come up, I want to make sure that they know that I'm somebody that they can talk to. It's very frustrating that I have students who literally knock on my door every day to talk to me about suicide and depression and all the things they're going through. And then I have 3 kids at home who don't do that. It feels very scary. And sometimes I take it personally, but just knowing that, like, I think as long as our kids are talking to someone, it doesn't necessarily have to be us. We hope it's us, but sometimes it's not. A lot of times they don't want to worry us. They don't want us to be, micromanaging their behaviors. And, I've heard some things of like, I know if I tell my mom I'm suicidal, she's going to like take the door off my room and I'm never going to have privacy again. But those are things obviously we do out of love and care and concern. But, parents are just not the first people that learn about this. So if you find out that your kid is not doing okay and they haven't told you about it, try as hard as you can to not take it personally, because it happens for me too. Even though I talk to hundreds of kids every year, it happens that my kids don't want me to be that person for them. Next slide, Jenny. Risk factors. Again, I don't want to confuse that, like they have to have experienced something like this to go through like suicidal thoughts, because sometimes it is situational. I'm very kind of mindful of watching for, things like breakups, right? Even things like my parents are getting divorced, like anything big that's happened in their life would make it like a situational thing where, sometimes their go-to thought is suicide. But the risk factors are having depression, having anxiety. People think of depression as the one thing, like the one mental health issue that really brings about suicide. But anxiety, a lot of completed suicides are students who have anxiety. Anxiety is very, very uncomfortable. It's exhausting. It's something where people want that pain to end. I've heard people say, like, when I was feeling really depressed, I was too low energy and apathetic to even think about suicide. But when I started having really bad anxiety and all this excessive negative energy within my body, I felt more inclined to kill myself because I really wanted those feelings to stop. Students will describe it as like, my mind is like racing about all these worries and fears, and I'm having panic attacks, and I just want it all to stop. So if your kid even says they're experiencing like severe anxiety, just be very careful and watch out for that too, because it's not just depression that would make somebody feel suicidal. Loss of or conflict with close friends and family members, a death of a family member can be a trigger. Again, a lot of times I see like breakups. High school relationships are important, and it's easy as a parent to kind of dismiss them as like, you don't know what love is yet, or you're not ready for that yet, so don't be so sad, there's more people there. But their feelings are real. And so just knowing that if you're noticing that your kid maybe had a breakup or something's going on, just keep an eye on them. History of physical or sexual abuse, exposure to violence, medical issues, having an STD is something that comes up surprisingly frequently in my sessions. And a lot of times students don't have the education to know that, you know, these are things that are treatable, or even for the ones that aren't treatable, that there's treatment options available. And so they'll start to feel hopeless about, you know, I don't even know what the point of living is anymore if I have an STD. Nobody's ever going to want me. Nobody's ever going to love me. I've had a student attempt suicide who had just been diagnosed with an STD. Bullying, this is huge. This is something that kids don't want to tell their parents, that they're being bullied. Being uncertain of sexual orientation, or being certain of your sexual orientation and not wanting to share it with their family. You know, students who are part of the LGBTQ plus community are more likely to commit suicide. Exposure to the suicide of a family member or friend, you know, all these different things. Drugs and alcohol definitely make this worse because they give people more impulsive behaviors, so they might be more inclined to actually act out on that. Next slide, Ginny. So if you're noticing any of this with your kiddo, you know, if your kid says like, I am not feeling well, I feel like I'm suicidal, don't leave them alone. If you notice anything where it looks like maybe they've ingested substances, anything, don't even hesitate, just call 911. Uplift is our team in Santa Clara County that if you call them and your child is under the age of 18, they will actually come out and do a formal assessment. They will determine if your kid needs, you know, to be hospitalized. I think a lot of times people hesitate to talk to social workers and counselors because they think, you know, if I even mention suicide, the social worker is going to put me in a hospital. That's what a lot of kids say. Like, I have to let them know that, like, that's not how it works. That's not what we do. The only time students are hospitalized is if they cannot keep themselves safe, like immediately, and they have immediate lethal plans that are happening within the next, you know, couple of hours. That's the only time. There's suicide prevention lines, there's text. If one of these text numbers, if you guys can remember this and share it with your kids, if they text 741-741, this is a crisis text line where a volunteer therapist will come on the line and walk them through and talk them through whatever they're experiencing, whether it's suicide or whether it's just another crisis in life, or they're having a difficult day, they have no one to talk to. This is 24/7. They can always text this number. I love to make sure that they have it on their phones all the time, just in case. We are going to wrap this up by just, how do we talk to our kids about suicide? Ginny, do you feel more open now with your experiences to talk to your younger one about suicide? Is this something that you brought up? What's been different since your experience?
You know, I haven't brought it up with him. We've talked about what, you know, his sister went through, but I haven't talked to him about his own feelings, you know, and I tend to, in my mind, because he's my baby, like, he's so little, like, he doesn't have feelings yet. And I need to get over that because he obviously does.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. So just a couple of tips when we're talking about it. Again, I know I've had parents say, like, I don't even know how to bring this up. I don't even know if my kid wants to hear from me. Every time I try to talk to my kid, they seem annoyed, but this is one of those conversations that we're going to have and just start to plant that seed. Timing is everything. Picking a place where I like to have my captive audience in the car. That's always some time where I know they have to listen to me. I'll ask them to put their phones down and we'll talk. Pick a time when you have the best chance of getting your child's attention. Car ride, or if maybe there's a suicide that's received media attention. I know there was a soccer player from Stanford that just, you know, we learned that she took her own life. You know, that's an open door to have that conversation. Think about what you want to say ahead of time. You know, even practicing it or reciting it can be helpful, because when we feel stressed in that moment, or we feel like our kids are not being, you know, engaged with us, just like know what we're going to say. You know, they could say something like, you know, you could say something like, you know, we talked about suicide with the parent coffee talk today. You know, is that something that you've thought about? Is that something that your friends have talked about? You know, be honest. If this is a hard subject for you to talk about, admit it. You know, I never thought I'd have to talk about something like this, but one of the things that I learned today in the presentation is that, you know, it's important to have open dialogue. Be direct. when it comes to suicide, we don't really beat around the bush. When I have kids that come in who I've heard are having suicidal thoughts, I don't really dance around it. I'm very much like, have you been having thoughts of suicide? So be direct. What do you think about suicide? Have you talked about suicide? Do you have friends who are dealing with this? Have you ever heard anyone say that they're thinking about suicide? And then listen to what they have to say. You've asked all the questions, and so it's time to listen and just see like what their thoughts are about. Is it something that they've ever thought about? Is it something that they even think about in general? Just keeping that dialogue open. Don't overreact or underreact. Overreaction will close off any future communication on the subject, and underreacting, especially in relation to suicide, is often a way to make ourselves feel better. Any thoughts or talk of suicide should always be revisited. Remember that suicide is an attempt to solve a problem that seems impossible to solve. And as a parent, it's like, I think our teens look to us because we are problem solvers, but remembering that we don't offer our advice and our feedback until after we've really, really listened. Our kids are more inclined to listen to us if they feel heard. And so making sure that they're saying what they need to say, that we're listening in a non-judgmental way, that we're not overreacting. If your kid says, I've thought about suicide, and you just start panicking and calling their doctor and all these things, they're never going to tell you that again. So just being mindful of that. Just lastly, some additional warning signs that should be getting our attention. Any statements that convey a sense of hopelessness, worthlessness, preoccupation with death, life doesn't seem worth it. What's the point of all this? I wish I were dead. Things like that. Again, a lot of times we're not hearing those blatant statements. So we might be looking at the behaviors, are they acting differently than they used to act? Are they talking more about death? Do they take more risks? Are they withdrawing from activities? Are they not having fun anymore? Are they not having conversations with us anymore? If they're using alcohol and drugs, it doesn't mean if your kid's smoking pot that they're suicidal, but I do worry about things like, alcohol, that's the depressant. If they're already feeling depressed and they're drinking, that's a big concern for me. Checking in on their feelings, are they looking and feeling irritable, anxious, sad, hopeless, having just a loss of interest and loss of motivation in general? But again, remembering that a lot of times this happens without any warning signs, and so just the more open we are with conversing with our kids, I think the more likely we are to identify something. And then being careful about situations that can trigger suicidal behaviors. Again, breakups, or anything that might make them feel vulnerable. Remember, like college acceptance times, anything like this, please consult with a mental health professional, whether that's me, whether that's Kayla, whether that's a psychiatrist, therapist. We have a lot of ways to support. There's something right now where every student in the district has access to 12 free sessions of therapy online with a licensed marriage family therapist or licensed social worker. So if that's something that you're feeling your kid might benefit from, take advantage of it. It's 12 sessions. It's free. They could do it here at school. It's all via Zoom. We've gotten a lot of really good feedback about that. I think we have a couple hundred spots for kids in the district, and we still have like over 100 of them left. So if that's something that you're interested in, let me know. I know that therapists are not really seeing kids in person for the most part right now. That's kind of a hard thing to find, but if you're open and your child's open to doing this on Zoom, again, we have spaces on campus where they can take those appointments, or they can take them at home, and it's free of charge to you. So something that if you just have an inclination, or you talk to your kid and you ask them, is that something you'd like to do? Let me know, and we can definitely set that up for you. If anybody has any questions for this piece, I know we're going to talk about something else in a few minutes, but if anybody has any questions about suicide or how we can support you, never hesitate to consult with myself, with Kayla Marshall, the other social worker here. If you even have any feelings or instincts or questions or anything that pops up for you, don't hesitate to consult, and hopefully we can guide you in the right direction.
Yeah, I also want to say that, to parents out there, I don't know how much advice I would have, but if you ever needed just to talk to another parent who's gone through this, I'm willing to listen, because I know how lonely it feels. Sorry, I'm going to try not to get upset. But yeah, it's that was probably the worst time of my life, and it's super, super lonely. And so if you just want somebody to listen to, like I said, I don't really have a lot of advice because everybody's different and I'm not an expert at all. But I'm certainly willing to listen. So I wouldn't like, I don't want you to like take away, this and walk away and be like, every time your child is depressed or not feeling great or they're anxious, that suicide's going to happen. And like, that's like the next step, because a kid can be depressed and not be suicidal. They can be anxious and not be suicidal. It's a warning sign. It's something to pay attention to, but don't feel like, oh no, like this is what's going to happen.
Mhm. Yeah. And always, if you have worries or feelings, you can always refer them to us. There's a link on our school website, and it can be anonymous. I don't have to let them know it's their parent, but just somebody to check in with them. I don't share what happens in session unless I feel like they are in immediate danger. So just know that I won't be able to like report back to you everything that they say, but I can just do a check-in to see if they're open to services. If that's something that would be helpful for you.
So Yvonne and I knew that we would actually end early today because this is such a heavy topic that actually an hour talking about it is a long
Too
time.
much.
We talked about it for just over 40 minutes. So I did want to like let parents, you have questions about anything. I know the mask mandate is about to drop starting next week. Well, technically it's Saturday, but we're not in school on Saturday. So really in reality, our first day with this is going to be next Monday. So masks are going to still be strongly recommended, but they are not going to be required, which means we're not going to keep pushing and like forcing them and like you have to wear a mask. It's going to be kind of, if they choose to wear a mask, great. If they don't, then that's their choice. So that's going to be for staff also. I honestly believe that I think most people will keep wearing a mask, at least for the time being. I don't see like all of a sudden next Monday nobody's masked. I just don't see that happening. But
yeah, I've been kind of testing out the vibe with students, and the majority of my students are like, no, I'm going to wear it for a while.
Yeah.
And then see what happens around campus, how everybody else gets sick or whatever. Like they have their own things why. And then somebody else told me like, I don't want to be the first person to not wear my mask. So they're like watching each other to see, like, they don't want to be that person if everybody else is wearing it. So it's kind of this weird, like, wonder, like, what's everyone going to do? What should I do? So that's kind of the temperature that I've taken lately with our kids.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, the entire school year, they haven't had to wear a mask outside, and most of our kids still wear masks outside. So
I still
that's
see
why
kids at lunch that take their mask down, take a bite, and then put it back up.
we do it all the time. I watch them every day. That's why I don't think things are going to change all that much. So.
Yeah.
Okay, well, if nobody has any questions, I'm going to stop recording. I know there's a parent that says they want a question. So yeah, I'm just going to stop.